How reliable is eyewitness testimony? And how can we increase the accuracy of eyewitness testimony? Every year, thousands of people are charged with crimes solely on the basis of eyewitness testimony. Unfortunately, though, this evidence is not always reliable. In fact, eyewitness error is the most common cause of wrongful convictions. Research supports 3 generalizations about eyewitness testimony. We'll explore the details of these 3 points on the next slides. 1. Eyewitnesses are imperfect. They don't remember every detail, and sometimes their memory fills in the blanks with incorrect information. 2. Certain personal and situational factors systematically influence the accuracy of their memory. Ideally, the testimony would only be influenced by the event, and wouldn't be swayed one way or another. But this is not what happens. 3. Judges, jury members, and lawyers are not well informed about these factors, nor do they know the limitations of eyewitness testimony. Let's take a look at an example to illustrate how our perceptions are imperfect and our memories are incomplete.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
That's right, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
And action.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
If you're like me, you may have missed a few things in this exercise. If we can miss a few things watching a short video clip, imagine what we might miss in real life while witnessing a tragic event. The challenge is that jurors tend to overestimate the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. In a few classic studies, participants could not distinguish between witnesses whose identifications were correct and those that were incorrect. There are 2 reasons for this tendency. 1. Jurors are not sensitive enough to the effects of lineup instructions, weapon focus, and other errors, the topics of this lecture. 2. Jurors tend to base their judgments of eyewitness testimony on the confidence of the eyewitness. But confidence and accuracy are not highly correlated. Confidence can be raised or lowered by other factors that do not impact accuracy. For example, asking eyewitnesses the same questions over and over can lead them to be more confident in their answers. Also, telling them that another witness said something similar can increase their confidence. Recall that psychologists depict memory as a 3-stage process. Encoding involves an individual's perceptions at the time of the event. Storage involves rehearsing and storing information in memory to avoid forgetting it. Retrieval involves pulling information out of storage when needed. It's important to note that this process is not perfect. Errors can occur at each one of these stages. Let's take a closer look. The first stage is encoding, which refers to a witness's perceptions at the time of the event in question. The encoding process is influenced by situational factors like brief exposure time, poor lighting, a long distance between the witness and the event, a suspect who is wearing a physical disguise. Also, encoding is impaired if we are distracted, highly aroused, or intoxicated. Highly aroused witnesses tend to focus more on the central features of an event, like the culprit, the victim, or a weapon, but at the expense of other details. So eyewitness testimony isn't always complete. In addition, intoxication increases the likelihood of making false identifications when the actual suspect is absent. The presence of weapons can also have an impact on encoding. The weapon focus effect is the tendency for a weapon to draw attention to itself and impair the witness's ability to identify the culprit. Some of the first evidence of this effect was produced in the 1990s. When a criminal pulls out a gun, a razor blade, or a knife, witnesses are less able to identify that culprit than if no weapon is present. Encoding is also influenced by race and age identification biases. We tend to be more accurate at recognizing members of our own racial group than other racial groups, a phenomenon known as own race identification bias. Something similar happens with age. We're better at recognizing members of our own age group rather than other age groups. The storage of memory is influenced by time. Generally, the memory for faces and events tends to decline over time. The storage of memory can also be influenced by information received after the event of interest. This is called the misinformation effect. Social psychologists have found that post-event information can come from television, parents, classmates, and even from the use of anatomical dolls and diagrams. Regardless of whether the information is true or false, it becomes integrated into the fabric of our memory. The storage process is also influenced by the wording of questions, the repetition of questions, and leading questions. For example, when asking about high-speed car accidents, interviewers tend to use the word smash instead of hit. And repeating a question can change witnesses' memories of events by suggesting that their initial answer was wrong and that they need to try again with a different response. Finally, leading questions can also change the storage of memories by suggesting certain details that may or may not have been present during the event. The retrieval process is also influenced by time. The longer the interval between an event and its retrieval, the more details we forget. It can also be influenced by the facial composites that witnesses view as part of the interrogation process. But these sketches rarely resemble the actual culprit. Lineup construction can increase false identifications when a foil stands out like a sore thumb. Biased lineup instructions can also increase false identifications when the criminal isn't actually in the lineup, and when the suspect is innocent. When simultaneous lineups are used, witnesses make relative comparisons among the alternatives and pick the one who looks most like the criminal, which leads to false identifications. Various familiarity-induced biases lead witnesses to identify people they've seen in other contexts, including innocent bystanders who were, in fact, present during the event. The lineup administrator can increase false identifications by telling witnesses to look carefully, by telling them to look again when they fail to make a selection, and by letting them know who the suspect is. The last bullet on this slide deals with confirming feedback. If eyewitnesses receive positive, confirming feedback about their false identifications, they may reconstruct their memory of the event to support their error. In one study, participants who were given confirming feedback, see the red bars in this graph, later recalled that they had paid more attention to the event, had a better view of it, could make out details of the culprit's face, found it easier to make the identification, and were more willing to testify in court than those who were not given any feedback about their testimony, see the blue bars. It's clear that eyewitness testimony is not always perfect. So, what do social psychologists recommend? First, they promote educating the legal community. Judges, juries, and citizens should know more about the limitations of eyewitness testimony to help them weigh evidence more appropriately. Law enforcement professionals should also know about this topic to avoid influencing eyewitnesses' responses. Second, question witnesses immediately and carefully to avoid memory loss. Be sure to use unbiased words that do not place blame. Avoid repeating the same questions over and over. And avoid leading questions, ones that lead people to answer in a specific way. Third, they recommend assessing witnesses' confidence in their responses. immediately after the event. This helps to prevent the impact of extraneous variables from increasing or decreasing their confidence. Fourth, average multiple witnesses' facial composites to create more accurate sketches. Today, we have the technology to do this with a few clicks of a button. Fifth, use 4 to 8 foils or innocent people in a lineup. It's important that they are as identical as possible. Sixth, use double-blind lineup procedures. Neither the witness nor the lineup administrator should know which person is the actual suspect. This helps reduce false identifications. 7. When using photo arrays, use sequential presentation and show each witness each photo, one at a time, not simultaneously. And finally, use unbiased lineup instructions, especially when the actual criminal is not known. You should now be more familiar with the limitations of eyewitness testimony and some of the strategies we can use to increase its reliability. In the next section, we'll review the interrogation process and some of the other factors that contribute to false identifications.